Thanks for joining us. I think this is number 6 in our series, which has been really, really good. And it's the turn of the hockey boys and the hockey parents to hear from someone who's been there and done that. Jethro, before I hand over to Mr. Hillock, I thought we'd quickly go run through some of a little background on you. Jethro, obviously you're a national player. You're a Jeppe Old boy and quite a CV. And I thought we could quickly just run through it. I know Bryan will go through it as well. But obviously a Jeppe Old boy, a proud Jeppe Old boy, something that a lot of people don't know. You captain the cricket side. You also got your half colours for cricket. And obviously you're a stalwart on the hockey field. All the usuals. You're a school prefect. You went on later into your provincial. You seem to have done it all, right from a young age all the way through. You've played for your country, both indoor and outdoor. You've been to a few World Cups. You've been involved in everything big in South African hockey, and you've also played a little bit overseas as well. So I think what a great opportunity for our hockey boys to learn a little bit from you, just to hear your experiences. And I can't really think of anyone else better than Mr. Hillock to take us through. So Jethro, welcome. And once again, from my side and on behalf of everyone at Jeppe, just a massive thank you for giving up your time and giving back to your old school.
Thank you, Mr. Gittins. Appreciate it. Welcome, Jet. It's good to see you again. I know we've chatted the last couple of days, and yeah, I'm really excited, and we're really blessed to have you on this chat. You've always been a very proud Jeppe Old boy, Jet, and I think your willingness to share some of your stories and some of your motivation with us today bears testament to the fact that we see you as one of our finest sons in terms of products of Jeppe High School for Boys. So thank you for joining us. I know you're quite busy. We're going to chat a bit later about all the things you're trying to juggle at the moment, but we are really, really privileged to have you chatting to us today. And my thanks also to the school and Mr. Gittins and Miss Feller for setting this up. Jethro, obviously, you're most famous for your hockey exploits. So I guess the first question we need to ask you is, where did it all start? Where did your hockey journey start? How did you get into playing hockey? We see there that you played under 13A for Easterns back in the day. So maybe you just want to take it from there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, good afternoon to everyone. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I think this is a great initiative from Jeppe and everyone that's involved. And yeah, really do appreciate the opportunity to have a slight conversation about me. I don't tend to talk about me too often. So I think I'm really grateful for this opportunity. And yeah, I think if we look my hockey, it was unfortunately, if we put it unfortunately, I grew up in Benoni. We needed a passport to get to Jeppe, which was obviously a little bit of a teasing comment through the times of travel from Benoni to Jeppe all those years ago. And I started at Benoni Northerns when I was 5 years old. My parents gave me the opportunity to join a club. And yes, we played on grass, which was obviously the challenge at the time, especially when you grew up and everybody else was still, was moving on to the Astro and we were still on the grass. And yeah, Eastern Gauteng is a good place for me. It gave me a lot of good opportunities at a very young age. I represented the under 13 Eastern Gauteng outdoor team and also the under 21 Eastern's indoor team. That went to those various tournaments, and it was a great opportunity for me to start a lot of my provincial hockey, and then with the likes of a few of the guys coming from the east, we went and joined Jeppe and Cares, and it was quite a nice opportunity for the East Rand boys to test their mettle against I suppose the dominance of most of the Johannesburg primary schools, and see if we can compete and obviously improve. And it was quite a nice opportunity because there was, like I said, a group of us that moved from the under 13s into under 14s under Gauteng, and from there we almost stayed together as a tight-knit unit from under 14s to under 18s, and it was quite a nice era, I think, for Southern Gauteng hockey at the time. And yes, Jeppe were very fortunate to have quite a lot of guys that came through the East Rand system, and I think it's still, as far as I take it, still quite a strong part of the Jeppe hockey at the moment. A lot of guys from the East come in and enjoy their time at Jeppe and work really hard. So yeah, that's where I started. It started quite a long time ago, if you think about it now. But yeah, it gave me quite a nice base, especially moving from grass to Astro, and then also playing under the Jeppe way. And I think that's quite a strong statement to move through my career, is that the Jeppe background and discipline gave me a lot of what I'm still using and doing today.
Jethro, yeah, thanks. That's some good feedback there. You are correct. We are still, quite reliant on the boys coming from the East Rand. There's quite a few boys on this chat that come from the East Rand, so I saw a couple of them smiling when you mentioned that you come from Benoni. We've got quite a few Benoni boys. Jethro, you've touched a bit on your time at Jeppe, but obviously, Jeppe molded you and shaped you into sort of the young man that you are. How important was the school, and in particular some of the influences that you would have had in terms of teachers and coaches at Jeppe, on shaping you as a young man?
Yeah, so I think interesting story to tell is my first day at Jeppe. Obviously, I was very fortunate. I had a slight introduction because there was a person that stayed at Cessaby in Matric in 2002 that actually introduced me to the school and gave me a little bit of a runaround on what the school's about and the traditions and all that. But I remember my first day at school, obviously being a nervous under 14 or grade 8, walking into the beautiful gates there next to the Payne Hall down towards Memorial Hall. And unfortunately, I had my blazer buttons undone, and a Matric and a couple of rugby first team players pulled me aside and showed me that my attire was incorrect and demonstrated that this needed to change. And that set the tone for my career to understand the traditions and the discipline that required many of the Jeppe boys that have gone through this with the years that they spend there, and obviously the guys that are there now, you clearly do understand what I'm talking about. But that was quite a highlight of my first initial experience at Jeppe, and it gave me a sense of a little bit more than just attending a facility like Jeppe and just going through the 5 years. It gave me a lot of other aspects of my life. And yeah, I think when we look at teachers, there was quite a few hockey and cricket teachers at the time that gave me a lot of direction in obviously the sporting aspect. And I start off with Roy Moraes. I was very fortunate that he had represented Jeppe a few years before as a first team player, and he was my under 14A coach. I was fortunate enough then when I moved on to under 16s that Ryan Ravenscroft was there around the time, and he had just come back from the Olympic Games in 2004, and he shared obviously a lot of that with a lot of the boys at the time. And then Gareth Ewing was pretty much my first team coach for my final 2 years at Jeppe, and just on those four coaches, they gave me a lot of basics and structure in obviously understanding the game of hockey. But then also Cyril Mitchley and a few of the cricket coaches really did well for giving me the discipline to play different sports and obviously understanding the game of cricket a little bit better. And I think what was so nice is having the winter and summer sports like the two that I played mostly when I was at Jeppe. It gave me quite a nice focus and platform for me going into life after school. And it was quite a nice platform, especially with all these wise heads that I had around me, giving me the feedback that I needed and the coaching that I needed to take on the world after school.
That's quite profound. They always say it takes a village sort of to raise a child, and I think the fact that you've mentioned quite a few people there that have had an impact on you is quite important, and hopefully a lesson our boys will take out of that in terms of when they do make it, remembering the guys that helped you along the way. I think that's quite important. Jet, just continuing a little bit on your Jeppe journey, your favorite Jeppe highlight. It doesn't necessarily have to be a hockey highlight. Gilbert de Villiers is quite keen to find out what is the one moment that stands out for you in your time at Jeppe as your most important highlight.
Well, I would give a sporting one and more of a slightly cheeky comment as well. Is obviously being a prefect, introducing the new grade 8s, we were fortunate enough to spend a night at the Payne Hall, and introduce them to a little bit of the traditions and maybe a little bit of new traditions, if we put it like that, for prefects. We're becoming a bit creative at the time. And yeah, I think one of the biggest highlights was actually giving the grade 8s a real introduction to some of the Jeppe cultures and traditions by spending a night in the Payne Hall, and also having a little bit of fun and watching the youngsters learn a little bit on the hard sense, the ins and outs of being a Jeppe boy. And it was quite a nice, I think for me, it was quite a nice experience, especially like almost in a sense handing over to the next generation, coming through on all the traditions and things that I've learned for 5 years. So I think that would stick with me for quite some time. But yeah, definitely on the hockey front, I was very fortunate enough to play in 3 Aiken finals. Yeah, I think it's just a tradition now that Jeppe just wins the Aiken trophy. So a lot of the boys will know the feeling, but I think that stands out quite nicely, especially on the hockey front. You tend to fight hard for 4 or 5 days continuously, and at the end of it, to be the champions, you sort of get that feeling that you don't get anywhere else. So yeah, I think those would be the 2 best moments of my Jeppe career. Obviously, I haven't spoken about an educational sense, but Jeppe are obviously still standing strong, that they do produce the academics as well. But yeah, definitely those would be my 2 fond moments.
Thanks, Jethro. Yeah, I think anybody who's been involved in any sport at any final will tell you how special those moments are. And you were obviously quite blessed to have had 3 of them. So yeah, very, very special. Jethro, moving on, I've chatted to a couple of our senior boys in the last couple of weeks, and some of the guys are now asking questions about, going overseas, playing hockey overseas, that sort of journey. You've obviously had quite a bit of experience playing overseas, in Malaysia, the UK, in Ireland. You've been around, you've seen what it entails. What would your advice be to a young hockey player, a guy in matric or maybe first or second year varsity, about that overseas experience?
Yeah, I think I'm going to come more in the sense of what it does to you as a person when you grow up. Maybe the hockey, I mean, obviously there's certain places in the world like Holland, Belgium, and Germany and England that the hockey standard is probably by far better than anything that we experience in South Africa. But I don't think that is the biggest aspect that, to be fair, will send someone overseas so that we can only get hockey. I think the biggest thing is learning in a foreign place, different languages, learning to live on your own, experiencing, trying to deal with foreign currency and spending and doing all that, I think was the biggest experience for me. I think I was very fortunate that I went to Ireland my first 3 years by going overseas, and obviously they speak English, which makes a massive difference. But I really learned the hard way when I went to Malaysia, that lots of people don't speak English and understand English, and you have to try and get around it as best as possible. But those are the best experiences, and I think that's sometimes we get a little bit in our comfort zone when we're in South Africa or at home, especially living at home. I think with your mom and dad looking after you 24/7 pretty much. I think the challenge is that going overseas tests you in the big world environment, and that's maybe what I would say is the best and most important part by going overseas. It's not necessarily only the sporting aspect that you get, but the rest of the life lessons that you learn, and learning on your own in a foreign place is probably the best way to grow up and become a man in the world. I think that's probably the best way to put it. I was, again, fortunate enough to play in several places, so it always gave me a new experience and new understanding of what the cultures and the direction of trying to integrate yourself into a foreign place. But I think for any person that wants to go overseas, or even hasn't even thought about going overseas, it's definitely an opportunity to for one, put yourself in a position that you're a little bit uncomfortable, and you've got to deal with certain circumstances that come in front of you, and then you grow by doing that. Even though if they're right or wrong, it's just a learning process, and that's probably the best thing for going overseas.
Jethro, thanks for that. I think it fits into the narrative of of what we try and teach guys, especially here at Jeppe, is that it's not just about the sport. You know, what's most important, and Mr. Jackson often mentions this in assemblies, is, you know, we want to produce good people that come out at the end of the day. You know, if you're a good hockey player, that's great, but you want to be a good person. So I really enjoyed that answer of yours, and I'm sure that you've given some guidance now to some of the guys that were thinking about that option. Jethro, it leads me on to sort of the next question, or the next part of your life sort of after school is, you know, obviously disappointment is quite a big factor in hockey, you know, as it would be with any sport, you know, having to deal with disappointment. So, you know, you're now out of school, you're playing a bit of club hockey, a bit of varsity hockey, and you really think you're going to make the under-21 side, and then your bubble gets burst and they don't pick you for that under-21 side. So let's talk a little bit about disappointment. I mean, that was obviously one of the big disappointments in your career. What happens after they don't pick you for the under-21 side? Maybe you just want to touch a bit on the disappointment of that and how you then overcame that. What was your plan to get through that stage of your life?
Yeah, I think we'll just go a little bit before that selection, and obviously what I did post not getting included. Yeah, I think I made a bold decision by going down to KZN and represent the Midlands in PNB. It was just obviously a little bit obviously more of another circumstance where I put myself out there and put myself in pretty much the deep end and see if I could swim or sink. Yeah, and I think that was bold because there were a lot of great senior hockey players in and around Maritzburg and the varsity, but not many strong competitive under-21 guys that obviously I'd been very fortunate when I played under 18, under 16, under 14 with Southerns, that we had such a strong group that almost we could stand out and be accounted when selection came in. But yeah, I think I was in a bit of a strange place because the under-21 age group had a really strong base of players that played for the SA under-19 and SA under-18 a couple of years before, and I hadn't received my opportunity to be in one of those squads, and I think I performed really well. I think I had a really good coach with Darren Gallagher and obviously strong players like Tommy Hammond, PG Geldenays, Craig Haley, and co around me to get me to play at the level that I could play at, so that could obviously get me my selection. But it was quite a hard pill to swallow, especially when I went to the under-21 IPT, and as a Midlands side, we had quite a few youngsters, a couple of Besh's players that the schoolboys actually stood out and actually played really well for that Midlands side. But we beat the likes of Southerns under-21A side, and we beat the province under-21A side with that very young side, and I was quite a core component for that group. But they'd unfortunately had selected the squad previously before that IPT, and that side was quite strong and competitive going to a Junior World Cup. But it was quite hard for me to handle because it was almost as if I knew I was capable of playing with those players and being in that squad. But then when you hear that news and you almost like feel like I didn't feel like I'd ever would get a selection again playing for South Africa, because I didn't manage to play SA schools. I didn't manage to get down to 21 squad, and then going to the Junior World Cup would have been pretty much my starting position for hockey. Yeah, so that was very hard for me to take. It took me about 3 months to understand that maybe hockey wasn't the position I was going to go into, and I did reasonably well playing a bit of cricket around the inland setup with under-19s there and thereabouts, and also trying to maybe look into getting into the inland national or that inland provincial setup. And actually, I thought that maybe that's the direction I needed to take to maybe take some sport into the next level. And then a strange call came out. Brendan Carolyn was the UKZN coach at the time for Durban, and he said that he's going over to Ireland, and Ireland's club side is actually playing in the AHL, and it was quite a great opportunity for some of the youngsters to get this opportunity to go over and play in the AHL, and not many South Africans at the time had played in the AHL. So it was, yeah, I mean, again, we're playing for Pembroke Wanderers. The Irish team wasn't going to be the side that would win the AHL, but they were definitely there to compete and play against some of the strong players in the world. And that was, I think, if I had to look at the discussion I had with my father, it was a bold decision to go, especially when I didn't know if my hockey career was going to take off or not. But yeah, and a couple of coaches around in Durban and inland said that I shouldn't go, which I thought maybe I should listen to the people that have supported me for 3 years that I was in Natal. But I decided to go over anyway. I went with Brandon Panther and Gowan Jones, and the three of us actually had a really good bond there at Pembroke Wanderers. We did really well in the Irish League itself. We were in the final of a couple of the tournaments and I think top 4 in the league. And then we played in the AHL, where all three of us pretty much played against some of the best players in the world. And from that point, with the commentators acknowledging the performances of the 3 South Africans, it actually gave us a little bit of a belief that maybe we just got to bide our time when we're coming back to South Africa, and hopefully we get that opportunity to play and get represented at some point, shape or form. So yeah, it was probably a very good turning point in my mindset for hockey. I think knowing that you could compete against some of the best European players and maybe even international players in the AHL meant that I just needed to see if and when I came back to South Africa that I might have my chance. And yeah, I was very fortunate that in a couple of years' time I then got my selection to go to a camp and then prove myself worthy if I was going to get selected or not. So that was a bold decision for me, but yeah, it was very hard to take, especially at that young age. I didn't know if I wanted to continue playing hockey or not.
Jethro, you mentioned in your answer there that you had a chat with your dad about sort of going overseas. We've obviously got some parents that are online that are busy watching now, and I'm sure more that will watch a bit later. What advice would you give to hockey parents about supporting boys through this journey? And maybe you want to draw a little bit more on sort of the role your parents played in your life. I mean, I can't ever recall being at a game watching you play without your dad standing in the corner sort of cheering you on and supporting you. So maybe just for our hockey parents, you've got some advice on sort of what they need to do to support their boys.
Yeah, so maybe I'll start with my parents first. I was very fortunate. Both of them were avid hockey fans before I even really got going with hockey. So I think they just enjoyed spending time next to the hockey field anyway. So I think by the time I got to Jeppe, my father was constantly there with my grandfather watching. My mother came for the Cares Jeppe fixtures to see what that was like. And those were quite spectacular moments, especially when your boy is playing on the main pitch at the main time against your rival school. I think that was a great opportunity for parents to get really involved. But my father and mother didn't really have too much say when it came to playing at Jeppe and doing certain extra activities around the hockey club and the governing body and all that stuff. They were just really there to show support for me, and maybe that's as much as they did. They didn't do anything more on supporting the school and the boys. But what they did do is they watched most of the time, and I think that was the most important part, is just for the boy understanding that your parents are always there. I think that gave me a massive belief that even if I had a bad day or a good day, that there was still somebody there supporting me and giving me the best shoulder to cry on if I needed to, or the arm around and celebrating as best as possible. But yeah, I mean, the advice for parents, I think it's always to be there as best as possible. And maybe sometimes we see a lot of parents that are overcommitted, which is great. It is a good opportunity to get involved and that, but also there's moments where we need just the boy or the kid to grow up and learn sometimes on his own feet. But as best as possible with big decisions, it does need a family decision to come in. And I suppose most of our parents, even I would say with you, Mr. Hillock, your mom and dad give you the best advices when you are also requiring it. So I think it's always needed, and they always need to be present to understand the circumstances. And I think that was good with my parents, is that they understood the circumstances that I'd gone through, because they'd always been there on the side of the field, seeing and watching what was unfolding. And when they needed to step in, they stepped in really well and gave me the best possible advice. So maybe that's something that's been very successful for me, is my folks were always there and thereabouts, but they weren't overly committed and involved, but they were there to give me, like I said, as a shoulder to cry on or a arm around the neck to say, let's carry on and push forward.
Jet, that's good feedback. I remember in my days at my other school, coming across to this side of town, and the Jeppe parents always struck me as the most supportive. They were quite vociferous, and umpiring sort of in front of the tuck shop could be quite intimidating for an opposition umpire. But yeah, I think that's good feedback, and we are blessed that we do have very good parental support here at Jeppe. So thanks for that, Jet. I chatted to some of your teammates this week, knowing that we're going to obviously interview you, and my question to them was quite simple. I wanted to know from them, and some of them have played with you almost your entire international career and many hundreds of club games, etc., etc. And I wanted to know from them the one thing about you that stood out for them. And it was quite humbling for me that, to a man, the people that I spoke to said that the most important thing about you is your strength of character. Now, obviously, strength of character is quite a broad term. But many of them spoke also about the fact that you have managed to balance working, studying, and playing sport at an elite level. So we've had a couple of questions in the chat, and also about that. How have you managed to balance all the things that you do and still play the level of hockey that you play, considering that a lot of our boys are student athletes? Being the key word here being student, that their schoolwork's got to still be important to them.
Yeah, I think I was also very fortunate. My mother, this was obviously my mother's turn on the development of me. Is she always was adamant that education will be always a priority, and maybe at some point in my career it was maybe a little bit later or earlier, depending how it worked, but it was definitely later. I went to Jeppe as a person keen for sport, and yet my education wasn't great. It wasn't poor either, but it wasn't a priority. And I think that sometimes we forget that education is number one. And yes, I think I only started realizing that post school that you need something, especially in the new day and age of trying to find job and work, and maybe changing the landscape of one, education or the business industry, that you need to have something behind you. And I only realized that pretty much when I went down to Natal, when the opportunity came to study BSc, I wasn't eligible to get in there, and that's the reality of it. Is I was maybe just slightly, I don't even know what the figure was, but I was slightly short on the mathematical requirements. And yet I still then pushed to try and see if I could study a BSc, which I didn't in the end, but I did a BCom that related to IT, and IT was definitely something that I was very passionate about, and still am very passionate, and it's led me further down the line to maybe taking a little bit longer than the normal person, but I'm still trying to make sure that my education is going to be my position of strength for when I finish my sporting career. And I know that we can keep saying it, but sporting careers only last 15 or so years. Some are very lucky that they can go a little bit longer, but you're going to need something to fall back on. And so my mother was very good at making sure that there were things in place for me to say, when you finish your sport, there's an opportunity for you to at least go into the world and be ready for it. I think if you talk about character, I think it did come down to a lot of the points of what Jeppe stands for and what it's about. And I did definitely grow up with a lot of the actual traditions and disciplines and requirements to grow a boy into a man. And I still follow through on that today, trying to show as much respect as possible to any human being. And I think that's what's given me an opportunity to push myself to the next level on any aspect. So from sporting to education to cultural. If you had to ask me to do an interview when I was at school, I probably would have gone through the first 10 minutes a bit nervous and not saying much. And now to have at least a conversation with a group of people, and talk positively about certain topics, I've had to learn and improve. But it's been an exciting process and something that I'm still excited to push and get better at and improve. So there's a lot of things that I suppose I most probably spoke about in answering your question there, but I hope it gives a little bit of understanding of the type of person I've tried to become, and with a strong base and traditions from Jeppe, it's given me a lot of opportunity.
Thanks, Jet. I think what you've said there is quite important. There's a misconception that nice guys finish last, and I think you are the exception sometimes to that, because you're a fantastic friend, a fantastic coach and person, and I think, like you said, some of the values that Jeppe instilled in you still carry through to you today. But I'm just going to repeat what I said. I think to take that sort of advice from your teammates on how they see you must be quite special, because basically what they're saying is at the end of the day, you're a good person. You know, we all know the quality of hockey player you are. Jet, just I want to move on to a little bit about your South African experiences now. Obviously, you've played under various coaches and in various teams at various tournaments. What's it like at the moment? Obviously, you know, the past year or so, there's been a change of management, coaching structure in South African hockey. What is it like at the moment? Obviously, you guys are on a plan, you know, the road hopefully to the Olympics next year. Give us some insight into that, the current vibe in the squad, you know, and sort of what the plans are going forward.
Yeah, actually, I'm probably going to be a bit bold in saying this, but I think the SA men's indoor and outdoor teams are both in a very good space at the moment. It's quite strange to say, but there's a lot of things that are maybe putting us in a position to achieve some really good results. And obviously, the outdoor program, we've gone through a bit of almost getting results, but not pushing over the line, almost getting to a position where we break into the top 10 in the world, but then not getting over the line. And I think, yeah, and I'm going to be maybe a little bit open. There was a lot of restructuring, rethinking when Mark Hopkins took over the national duty. He pretty much put a lot of different ideas and concepts in place that I think we as the national team hadn't experienced, especially because there had been such a strong culture and structure in place for quite a long time. From I think I would say 2006 to 2012, that structure seemed to just stay in the group for a long time. But then from 2012 onwards, we seemed to lose a little bit of what we were trying to achieve as a national team. And I think maybe what's so nice about what Gareth Ewing and his staff are doing at the moment is they're really trying to figure out what the best dynamic is for this team and what culture we need to try and strive for this team first, and then hopefully if that works out as best as possible, the results will speak for themselves. And what's been exciting is that when Gareth took over in March last year, he really tried to make a few bold decisions and say, listen, this is what we're trying to achieve with the squad. It's maybe not going to be seen at the tournament that was there at the time, which was the Olympic qualifier in India. It was not going to see an African Cup. It's maybe not going to be seen at the Olympics, but it was supposed to be a process that led towards some glory in 2023 at the World Cup. So he started off with a lot of simple build-ups and key concepts that we've been trying to focus on. And I have to say, even from March to when we played that Olympic qualifier, there had been progress. And now when we went to African Cup, there had been a little bit more progress. And now I think because of this lockdown has come at the time that obviously no one really wants because of the Olympic Games being postponed, but it's actually come at a nice time for us to rethink of what our culture, what our values, and how do we treat each other as people first, and then obviously trying to push each other as players on the field. So the dynamic is really positive. It's really good, and it's obviously testing a lot of us. Brent's having a nice little conversation with us here. But yeah, it just seems to be in a nice place, and yes, we're going to be probably butting heads with a lot of people in our group at the moment. I mean, I know we've got a large group of 45 in the squad at the moment, and a lot of people are going to be probably a bit conflicted in the ideas and plans ahead. But the good thing is there's a lot of buy-in at the moment, and it's looking quite positive. And Gareth is leading the charge with Brett Tucker, Claire Black, and a few of the people there that have really done a lot behind the scenes. Tim Drummond's leading us quite exceptionally at the moment and giving us a positive light in the direction of building culture. And it's maybe a nice time for us to set that up, and maybe it could be a start for some positive results and maybe even some success at the Olympics or at Commonwealth Games or the World Cup in the near future.
Jethro, that's it's hell of exciting, times for South African hockey, both indoor and outdoor. You touched on a couple of things there. The last two questions I have, and then we'll take some questions from the boys, is you spoke there about culture, which is often built by the people in the side. What would your advice be to the junior guys? The grade 8 and the grade 9 hockey players. The guys that want to be where you are one day. Kian Robinson, who's one of our senior hockey players, also posted a message there, about becoming a professional. So what advice do you have for the little guys about how to get there?
Yeah, it's a tricky conversation, because I suppose there's a lot of different people saying different things and wanting different outcomes for a lot of players. I'm just going to talk on my experience and where I've pretty much ended up. Is I've taken time to get where I am. So I feel like the idea of, if you want to be a representative, a South African representative player, you're going to have to bide your time. And if it's early, if some players will get it earlier than others will get it later and excel. It's just a different dynamic, and each person goes through their own little means and way. So for me, it's staying hungry. I think staying hungry to try and achieve what you want to achieve. Be patient that the results might not be coming in this week or next week. They might be coming in 3 to 4 years down the line, or maybe even longer. A pure example is Rassie van der Dussen. I mean, he's played his first test match for the Proteas at the age of 29 or 30. I mean, he bided his time for a long time, especially when he did really exceptionally well in his early days of his career. And when the opportunity comes, you've got to take it with both hands. And I think there's been quite a nice young generation that's come through into the national indoor and outdoor teams, that both teams have the youth that are putting up their hand and wanting to be a part of the process going forward. So that's how I would describe it as best as possible, is one, stay hungry on what you're trying to achieve, 2, be patient that someday it will happen, and 3 is take your opportunity when it comes, because we probably, some of us only get one chance. I was very fortunate that I got my chance at 23 years old, and I only received 23 caps in my first period, and I thought that would be me. I didn't think I would be able to play more hockey for the South African men's team, but now I continue to try and see if I can stay in the squad for longer and hopefully guide the national process going forward. So yeah, I think it's just, I would say those concepts are really cool and a nice way to look at it, because they almost lead into each other every time. Every success, every failure, every process that you're going through, it almost leads towards those, I would say, those 3 things. Yeah.
Jet, and then sort of my last big question. Some would say that you're playing at the moment some of the best hockey of your career. Well, I definitely feel like that. And then obviously coronavirus, lockdown. What have you done to try and number one, keep physically fit, and number 2, to keep your mind sharp in this time?
Yeah, I think the interesting part about this lockdown, it's actually given me real opportunity to get some feedback on what I'm probably good at and what I'm not good at, and also have time to sit down and write them down and put them in place and put them as a measure. I think sometimes we get caught up with routine, and routine just allows things to just go over. I think this has given a little bit of thought for me to stop my process and start looking and reevaluating long term, especially because I'm getting a little bit, I'm not saying old, but I'm just getting a little bit elderly, let's put it that way. But yeah, just to reevaluate what my strengths and weaknesses are, especially in this lockdown period. I know for a fact that I can be better at quicker feet and longer ball or overheads and stuff like that. So there's a lot of good things that I can get stronger at before I get back onto the field. And then also mentally is like finding video that I've been very fortunate that I've kept a lot of my test matches that I've played for the outdoor program on a hard drive, and now it gives me option to look at the mistakes and the successes that I've achieved in each game, and put them in a little bit of a space that I can now look at myself and reevaluate myself and put myself in a great idea. And it's a good opportunity to also have a bit of guidance. I've been very fortunate that I've got like 3 or 4 mentors that are around me that are giving me the best advice as possible. They're not the right, it's not necessarily the right advice, but sometimes it's just the best advice. It could be totally off picture, or it could be exactly what is needed. But at the same time, it's been really cool to actually have this period to reassess the process, reassess what I'm looking at doing over the next couple of years. I know also for a fact that when my studies are done, I need to look into the aspect of working world, and these things are all pretty exciting opportunities that await me, because now I think I've had time to sit down and reevaluate and put pen to paper. And I think that's probably, I know for some of us are still going to school and we still got all these different new technologies that we've got to try and get adapted to and work out. But it's also maybe a time to do that and picture what could be potentially coming up and hopefully being prepared for it.
Ever the optimist, Jet. That's a really nice way of looking at things. I think it's quite profound. Okay, we're going to go into the speed questions, and then we're sort of done. We'll stop the recording after the speed questions, and then there's quite a few boys that have asked questions in the chat, and then we'll answer those sort of after the recording's ended. Okay, so quick answers, Jet. You've got 1 or 2 words max to answer. Your hockey role model growing up?
Unfortunately, it has to be an Australian, but Matthew Wells.
Okay, good.
Australia.
The best player you've ever played against?
So a very good man, Jacob Wetton, another Australian. We've had a couple of tussles at the World Cups and the Commonwealth Games. I seem to be one down on him, but there was one game that I loved to bits, was against them at the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow, where I definitely outperformed him there on that game.
Good. Your favourite hockey destination?
Yeah, I got to say, I love Bhubaneswar, India. I think that was just a mind-blowing experience when you're treated like a superstar, and all you try and do is you tell the crowd to stop taking selfies and asking for selfies because it becomes a little bit too much. But to play in front of 15,000 people is something that you don't get any day in your life. So yeah, that was a great experience.
Better than playing in front of mom and dad on a chilly Sunday morning in Joburg.
We'll never forget those days, especially playing like Potchefstroom out there on their Astro at Picker there, and the only people watching are the 2 parents that are there. That was great times.
Okay, last 2. Indoor, outdoor?
I can't say either because I'm enjoying both. I'm enjoying both at the moment.
Fair enough. And lastly, your best roommate that you've ever had, and why?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate that obviously with the tours that I've been on, but I think in the early days I had Lloyd Norris-Jones and John T. Robinson, and both very unique type of characters, both different to I would say the normal person in their own way. But yeah, Lloyd Norris-Jones at the World Cup in 2014 was probably my confidence boosting roommate that always had my back in most things and gave me the advice to go and push on further. I think that was a great opportunity of rooming with Lloyd. Yeah.
Hey, brilliant. Thanks, Jet. Mr. Gittins, do you want to come in here? And then
I thought Kyle Murray's question here is a really good one. Being a pro sportsman, there must be lots of pressure. Jethro, how do you handle the pressure on the global stage? I think that's something that all of us can take from. How do you handle big pressure situations?
Yeah, I think the reality is maybe I'm also coming again to start a little bit before you get to those pressure situations. You've actually bided your time on the AstroTurf, thousands of hours, thousands of minutes on preparing for that moment. And I think that's what the really cool thing about growing through the sport and then becoming, say, as you say, a professional, is that you've done the hard work to get to that stage, that it's just backing what you've achieved and what you've done before and backing your ability to perform the task. So a pure example is a drag flick or a penalty stroke in a really tough situation. For most of us, I think we've done 1,000 balls or 10,000 balls or whatever it is that we sort of know that the ability is there. It's just backing it and understanding that you'll get through it, even if you feel overwhelmed. It's just to reset yourself and know that you can get through that.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I think sometimes young people think there's some sort of voodoo in the air that gets you through these things, but really preparation, hard work, the early mornings. This hockey club is not short of that, and there's a reason why you guys hold your nerve in those finals, because you work so hard. So, Jethro, thanks for that. I think it's been outstanding. I'm really grateful for the time and effort you put in. I know that you've offered your help to Mr. Hillock and the club before as well, and I don't know if the school says it enough, but we're extremely proud of you. Over 100 caps for your country, and you've got massive support here at Jeppe, and thanks a lot for giving up your time.
Yeah, I think, again, I've got to respect everybody at Jeppe at the moment that has moved the school into a really positive space. And now we're excelling in not only maybe one event or one sport or one cultural or one thing. We're actually growing the school tremendously well. And for me, I've got to compliment everybody that's at the school at the moment for doing that. I think it can only be a testament of all your guys' hard work, and I thank you for that opportunity, and also thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. I think sometimes I'm obviously not as close as most of the guys that are local in Joburg to have a chat to a lot of the guys, but when I get my chance, I do tend to pop in and say hello to every Jeppe boy that I get a chance to see, and it's been exciting to see everybody excel and doing exceptionally well.